Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream, and thank you so much for tuning in for another show. The talks are still ongoing to reach a ceasefire, with more concessions coming from Israel, and now the American side is having one demand from the Palestinian resistance that they believe might make these ceasefire talks succeed eventually. Benjamin Netanyahu all of a sudden is talking about the possibility of ending the war. Netanyahu he did not use the term ending the war at any point in this genocide in Gaza. And for the first time, he's talking about the possibility of ending the war, but on conditions. Now, the conditions of Benjamin Netanyahu, they constantly change. They go from elimination to disarming to defeating to not having military capability, to all of that talk. In the meantime, the Palestinian resistance is eating IDF terrorists like peanuts. They're having barbecues every single day in Gaza, with more footage coming from the Palestinian resistance about this attempt to kidnap one of the IDF terrorists inside of the Gaza Strip, with the recent video that they published inside of Gaza. This was an ambush that took place in the Khan Yunis area as part of David Stone's operations coming from the Palestinian resistance. This is in the eastern part of Khan Yunis, an area where Israel has 2 divisions. Do you know that? 2 divisions. Now, how big are the divisions? We don't know how much, because they don't have that many soldiers. Here they said that they targeted a Merkava tank and a troop carrier and 2 D9s with Yasin 105s. And they also had exchange fire exchange between the resistance fighters and the IDF terrorists. And that they tried to kidnap one of these terrorists, but the field situation prevented the Palestinian resistance from doing so. And as we can see here, the Palestinian resistance is monitoring everything. And I'll tell you what Israel said, by the way, about this video, because the Israelis are watching it too. Here we have a genocide terrorist sitting there from the Kfir brigade, one of the most cursed brigades in the Israeli army. And the Palestinian resistance fighters are, praying that their operations are successful, going from everywhere, rubble, destruction, everything. Israel destroys and destroys again and destroys 3 times. And of course, they're targeting children day after day, and women and people seeking aid. Today, we had a statistic that over 790 approximately people were killed in Gaza only seeking aid. Imagine that. And Israel tells you, oh no, we want a safe haven for them so that they can get aid safely. We want to create a safety zone. Nah. So here the Palestinian resistance fighters are preparing the Palestinian-made Yasin 105 RPG, going there, no hesitation, to head on, see and confront the IDF terrorists who are destroying even more buildings inside of the Gaza Strip. And as you can see here, the Palestinian fighter is running to target one of these bulldozers. Look at them destroying. One of them is destroying here, other one destroying a building there. Then this is the guy that they're going to catch, by the way. Here they explode one of these bulldozers or diggers, whatever it is. Of course, this is the army, though. This is an Israeli terrorist here. And then they, of course, start to shoot at them. So then this other genocide soldier here is running. But before we get into this, before we get into the continuation of this, it was widely circulating in Israel, this video. Some people were saying, oh my God, we're shocked that this is happening in Gaza. Look, they have the capacity to see our soldiers, and they're not in tunnels, and they're above the ground, and they're recording when they're operating. But the IDF said after a heroic confrontation with the Palestinian terrorists, he was killed, this guy. You can see him running for his life like a rat, like a coward, like all of the Israeli army soldiers, cowards. They run away like rats whenever there's a face-to-face confrontation. The only time that they feel comfortable is when they are in a position of an advantage, like, fighter jets or, against civilians. That's why they constantly target people and women. And by the way, they're so pathetic. They look for individuals. They'll sometimes follow random people because they see them like they're happy. The other day, they targeted the cafe in Gaza. What does a cafe do to you? One of the only normal places next to the beach where people, can get away and have a bit of a relaxing time. But when they're met with real men, with real fighters, once they're confronted by someone who isn't even equipped as them, by the way, they flee. They flee like cowards. So that, of course, debunked the whole narrative coming from the Zionist media. Now, the coward IDF rat runs away, but the Palestinian resistance fighters follow him, and they continue to follow him, and then they try and kidnap him. They try and imprison him, right? One of the fighters saying, "Oh, look, he ran," but then they go and see him. Anyway, it reaches a point where they feel like another Israeli force is coming, so they eliminate him. Eventually, they take all of his weapons, they eliminate him, they neutralize him, and then they flee. And in Israel, this sent shockwaves. Why? Because the people are seeing these images, Palestinians with sandals, coming from everywhere, wherever Israel destroyed. 2 divisions, they're saying, is sending in Khan Yunis. A division, you're talking about 25,000, 30,000. Lord knows how much these people have, because so many refuse to go and serve. But saying that every single day that they're inside of the Gaza Strip, they're roasted. They're being roasted by the resistance, by the way. So they're conducting these massacres on a day-to-day basis, barbaric massacres against innocent civilians, children, every single day. They're still targeting them. Today, more massacres happened in multiple parts of the Gaza Strip. But again, when they're met with the resistance fighters, they lay on the ground like cowards and rats. So there are more people talking now in Israel, like, what are we doing there? And why are we still there? And, there's negotiations happening today inside of the Gaza Strip, talks between the mediators too. Why are more and more people from our soldiers getting killed there? And of course, Benjamin Netanyahu, he doesn't really address that. He says that, we need to continue our operation. For the first time today, he's saying that, we actually might end the war, but on certain conditions. As a matter of fact, this is the first time that Benjamin Netanyahu is even mentioning the prospect of ending the war, but he made several statements. This was one of them, published in the Times of Israel, stressing that Israel will return to fighting if true 60 days don't yield deal to end the Gaza war, confirming that he's looking to get to a deal to end the war. What does that say? Because listen, we need to understand things. This war, this genocide isn't going to go on forever. But what do we understand, and where are things going? And why is Benjamin Netanyahu all of a sudden using the term the ending of the war, a term that he refrained from using, by the way? It's because he's preparing the ground. As a matter of fact, Benjamin Netanyahu is already starting, or has already started from several weeks, to push for the next election campaign. having these kind of interviews with children and what have you. Now preparing the ground after coming from the United States, visiting the memorial location of Thomas Jefferson, if I'm not mistaken, because he was like the father of American democracy and, the will of the people. Going back to Israel to talk about the will of the people, the will of the Israeli people. He's preparing himself for elections. But this is a preparation for the time when Netanyahu does decide to go on a ceasefire. And I mentioned before, the prospect of Netanyahu reaching a ceasefire will increase next month when the Israeli Knesset goes on a holiday, a break, because then no one can take any motion against him. There would not be any risk to collapse the government. Following that, it would be very close to the Israeli holidays. Then we're already into 2026. 2026, Netanyahu ideally would want an election happening before the budget passes. And that's towards the end of March and the beginning of April 2026. In the meantime, the talks are still ongoing. As a matter of fact, Israel is having more concessions in the talks. They're showing more leniency now. That leniency cannot be separated from the images that you saw from Gaza and the scenes of this genocide soldier and the other genocide soldiers being eliminated and neutralized by the Palestinian resistance. Why? Because they have losses. If they don't have losses, it's a separate story. But they have losses. So apart from the fact that the Palestinian resistance has the prisoners of war as leverage, they have their resistance to Israel, and it's unbelievable increase in recent weeks, by the way. In recent weeks, the Palestinian resistance escalated to levels unseen, and that's 2 years into a full-blown genocide, siege, starvation, mass murder, infanticide, urbanicide, whatever, solasticide, whatever you want to call it, all combined. But the Americans are now asking Hamas for a favor. What is that favor? That favor is basically delay the talk about withdrawing and the lines of withdrawal from the Israeli. They're telling Hamas, Israel is still finding it difficult now to agree to, withdrawing to certain areas inside of the Gaza Strip. They want a parameter or a security buffer zone that's bigger than the previous one that they withdrew up until in March, even before March, from January up to March, because in March they had a further withdrawal, or a few weeks into the ceasefire. But now they want to remain in certain areas, like 2 to 3 kilometers in Rafah, to create this new Morag access, and then 1 to 2 kilometers all across of the Gaza Strip. They basically want to take away 40% of the Gaza Strip. That's what it means. But the Palestinian resistance is saying, no way, it's not going to happen. That's a position of strength. The Palestinian resistance already forced Israel many times before, by the way, and way before Al-Aqsa flood began, to withdraw and to expand the fishing area and to have the borders literally on the edge of the Gaza Strip where they're meant to be, because Israel was looking for like security zones and what have you. So now they're pushing for that too. And from an American perspective, they're viewing that Israel is showing more leniency on the other parts, and this is still a tricky thing. So they're asking the Palestinian resistance, delay it until the end, please. So Israel is showing more leniency on the ending of the war. We had Netanyahu even stating that, even when it comes to the aid. And there were also reports in Israel that it's removing its veto right? One of the Israeli media channels said Israel removed its veto of releasing senior Palestinian prisoners. You know, important names, leaders of Palestinian political movements or leaders inside of the Palestinian resistance who participated in very big actions against the state of Israel. So there's still potential there, but again, no declaration yet. That is primarily due to the timeline that Benjamin Netanyahu wants to reach the ceasefire at. Again, of course, no one can confirm anything, but this is what it looks like where things are going to. And by the way, this invasion in Lebanon that he had, that I spoke about in one of the previous videos, this invasion is to cover up the huge failure that's happening in Gaza, to show some sort of success, and also cover up the fact that they might be making more concessions in having, you know, limited invasions inside of Lebanon here and there. And he's done that before by having a full-blown war against Lebanon. So that's on the negotiation front. And of course, the developments on the ground from the Palestinian resistance. But there was one more thing that I wanted to talk to you about. You see, I told you about Zionists before, and that the Zionists are, some of them can be followers of different religions. So you'll have the Jewish Zionist, you'll have the Christian Zionist, who are the majority, and then you have the Muslim Zionist. Now, the Muslim Zionists, they usually try not to talk too much. But now, ladies and gentlemen, we had a visit to Israel from who? From Muslim scholars, led by a Tunisian imam who lives in France and close to Macron, by the way, called Hassan Shalghoumi. Hassan Shalghoumi and a couple of other Muslim clerics going to Israel. This was one of the videos that was released. Of course, they went like to the 7th of October propaganda tour, and this Shalghoumi was like seen crying. And another bearded guy from Britain as well was going there and crying, and you know, and this Shalghoumi was saying, you're the representation of democracy, you're the representation of freedom, etc., etc. But it didn't just stop there. He went and saw an Israeli minister. Then we had this video when he went and saw that Israeli minister sitting next to an Israeli minister, and you know, with the other Muslim scholars chatting to him and hugging him now, and trying to kiss his hand. Trying to kiss his hand too. Kissing the hand of a Zionist. I mean, kissing the behind of a wild boar is easier than kissing the hand of a Zionist. But this man is going there trying to kiss the hand of an Israeli minister, and going and praising, you know, the Israelis and Israel, and saying that, oh, Iran is the enemy, and Iran is the enemy of Muslims, and what have you. Deviating, no mention about anything, of course, in Gaza. And he also went and met with Yitzhak Herzog, the Israeli president, as we can see in this image here. Look, your Muslim scholars going to Israel to show solidarity. A couple of things that I wanted to note here. Number one, these people represent no one but themselves. I mean, anyone who even shares something similar, really. These people are almost non-existent in terms of population in the Muslim and Arab world. So even if you have like people who are not either, you know, active or talkative or what have you, they wouldn't support Israel, like, you know. But these people went there, a fringe, a small group that has gone astray, very, very far astray. I mean, we say "Wala ad-dallin," right, when we pray, and they supposedly pray and say "Wala ad-dallin," as in, don't make us from those who went astray. And anyway, they're going to glamorize Israel and to whitewash the crimes and show solidarity. And this guy over here, he even wore this, the 7th of October thing. This sympathize with the 7th of October. So first and foremost, these people have nothing to do whatsoever with representing Muslim people. Secondly, Islam as a religion that urges you to, stand on the side of justice and stand in face of oppression, right? But then there's a sensitive period here. There's a sensitive timing. Why now? Couldn't they have gone before? Israel needed sympathy. And Violet, our moderator, is showing dollar signs. Probably. There's probably money too. But why now? Well, they're having the talks, right, about this peace process with the Arab world, and we're going to have these Abraham Accords, and so many countries are going to join in, and, we're going to open a new horizon in the region. Apart from the fact that, there's nothing concrete to prove that new naturalization with Israel is about to happen. Agreement, security understandings, governments might have that, even very hostile governments who have no sort of connection. But naturalization, the way Israel is trying to sell it, we're seeing nothing substantial here. And I mean, even the countries who already had peace treaties with Israel or went into what's falsely labeled as the Abraham Accords, what have they gained? Have they gained anything? Is it putting them in a powerful position? Or is it putting them in a weaker position, in a more despised position by everyone, by their own people, and generally? And like, what is Israel going to do to them exactly? And of course, with each country that went into these deals with Israel, they had their own demands too. They had their own interests. They wanted certain technology from Israel. And also Israel wanted recognition. Israel always begs for recognition. Netanyahu himself begs for recognition from Arab and Muslim states. You know why? Because Israel is a thief, pariah, fake state. A state based on theft and killing. And what does a thief want more than be recognized? That's why they beg the Arab states. And it doesn't matter what you think about the Arab and Muslim states, by the way, and their position and, the lack of action and how bad and how appalling, all of that. But Israel constantly begs them for recognition. Why? Because it's a country based on theft. And a thief always wants legitimacy, wants recognition. Therefore, it strives to get this recognition. Now, Netanyahu, and although these people met with Herzog, but Herzog is still a Zionist who is the president of Israel. So, enough said. Netanyahu is trying to show the Israeli public, because he is very, very interested in what the Israeli public has to say. He's trying to show them that, whatever concessions that I make now, they're going to be worth it. Because look, we have bearded Muslim people who supposedly follow the same religion that we constantly speak bad about, by the way. They're coming here and are sympathizing with us. Why is he doing that? So that the people can be convinced in Netanyahu's position that, look, even if we do reach a ceasefire inside of the Gaza Strip, there's going to be good results. We're going to have more paid Muslim Zionists coming to Israel and whitewashing the crimes. Or like this Shalghoumi said, come and praise Israel and say that they are the representation of brotherhood. They are the representation of brotherhood. They're the representation of democracy. They are the representation of hope. And he was tearful. Him and the other British Muslim dude there, they were crying like that when they were saying the October the 7th Zionist tour. You know, the Zionist tour that Israel takes these people to? They bring journalists to come and view the video, which, by the way, doesn't include any sort of massacres, but I saw everything. You see Palestinian resistance fighters keen on innocent lives, and no exchange unless they feel like threatened or someone tries to do something or what have you. When on the other side we have a live stream genocide 24/7. So again, I mean, these people, they represent no one but themselves, but they're there for a reason. And that reason is primarily due to Benjamin Netanyahu and his image and any potential concessions he's going to make in Gaza to prove to his own people that it might be worth it, because, look, we're going to have recognition from 9 Muslim Zionists who came to Israel and, started to hail Israel. And they're delusional, by the way. Like the Israeli president, Yitzhak Herzog, he was saying that these people represent the silent majority. Imagine. They represent the silent majority in the Muslim world, which couldn't be further from the truth, by the way. But they're convincing themselves, by the way, that that's actually the case. That these people are indeed the people, the actual people. And again, look what's going to happen after they meet us, and more countries are going to join in. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you on this in this live stream. I'll open the space up for some of the community participation and comments. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in again. Donna T, The Virus, Tony F, and MYR, thank you very much for your supers, much appreciated. I hope everyone is doing well, and thanks again for tuning in. If anyone has like any questions or anything, if you wouldn't mind highlighting them for me, just so I don't miss anything. AK, any update on the Yemeni army or front? Well, after that attack that came from Yemen, we actually haven't seen a lot of exchanges. If you recall, when Benjamin Netanyahu went and visited Washington, Yemen carried out a strike against the Ben Gurion airport. Then Israel carried out attacks in Yemen. Some of them thwarted by Yemen. And again, the same places like the Hodeidah port, because they don't have targets, but they want to show like they're attacking. And the genocide coalition crumbled. The United States made a deal with Yemen. So Israel had to take action on its own. Then there were 11 strikes coming from Yemen. And then nothing happened after that. But there was no declaration that the operations are stopping or anything of the sort. No, we still haven't seen that whatsoever. And it isn't going to stop up until the genocide stops and also the siege is lifted according to Yemen. And KZ Landscaper, how long do you think Israel can keep up this with the economy folding? That's very interesting. And I'll tell you something. There are certain things to do with the Israeli economy that can't be really understood. Why? Because it's a small country. It has been spending ridiculous amounts on this genocide. It had a lot of losses internally in multiple sectors. Israeli businessmen who are worth billions left the country and took all of their money out, billions. Foreign companies are not coming to Israel. Foreign companies are going out of Israel, taking their headquarters out. Huge companies like Amazon saying we stopped serving Israel altogether. Then you have credit rating agencies reducing the Israeli rating, like Moody's, for example, to negative with a negative projection. Several reductions. Moody's twice, they did it twice. And then they had a negative projection too. Negative projection means the rating body does not foresee anything good happening. Why? Because they view any political solutions and they consider them when they want to rate a country. So from their perspective, Israel hasn't done anything to strive for peace. They haven't had any solutions and nothing really, progressed on that front. So all of that is bad. But you might ask yourself, well, how comes they're actually still functioning? Well, the answer is very simple, by the way. It's a colonialist enterprise. It's supported by the colonial powers who set it up. Simple. They'll channel money, and that doesn't have to be visible or declared. Very simple. Let alone the fact that they constantly get more and more aid and money from the United States, which is an example of how it's supported. But much of the financial support from Israel from wealthy families and wealthy powers isn't declared. That's how they continue to maintain their presence. Otherwise, if they were like any other country apart from Israel and had all of this, they would have been in a disastrous situation. You see? So despite all of that, though, there has to be a limit. When is that limit going to arrive? What is that limit exactly? And when will it end? Well, we're seeing how much progress that there is now to end it. Because it doesn't matter how much you're getting in. If you're not going to have organic growth, you're gonna be facing it internally. And internally, you need to understand the criticism, by the way, and the internal talks about the day-to-day life of the people and the economic situation and the lack of security and the lack of certainty, all of these things. And Matlas X, thank you. There's a rumor floating that MBS and some Qataris were Epstein clients that is being leveraged to use them to sign the Abraham Accords. Well, that Epstein list, it looks like it's never going to be published. Trump is, he was asked the other day, when is it going to be published? Because they promised they're going to publish it, right? And then he was like, oh, why are you even asking about the Epstein list? Probably because he was on it. But you don't know, because much of what we're seeing today in terms of political moves, certain behaviors, or lack of action, or certain actions, could be due to all of this blackmail happening from the Epstein list. But again, you know, with the MBS or people in Qatar, you know, we haven't seen anything to confirm that, but the files haven't been published. So unless they are published, we can't really say. And Donald Trump, he's trying to keep it a secret. Ron, thank you. You're welcome. How is the Trump support of Bibi taken in Israel to drop his court case, etc.? Well, it's taken in two different ways. Some people are saying that the American president is right, including politicians, and it's ridiculous. Those are typically the Netanyahu allies who already have a problem with the Israeli courts and who already wanted to have a reform to remove, of course, the powers from the Supreme Court and dictate who is assigned to run the Supreme Court in Israel. And then there are others who criticize it. One of them was the opposition leader who said that a foreign country leader should not intervene in a country's internal politics or, you know, how its judicial system is run. Regardless of how it's perceived, there are actions, and those actions are already taking place. And one of the people participating in this is none other than this man in the middle of this picture here. It's Yitzhak Herzog, the Israeli president. He's participating in the talks now to try and get a plea deal or like amnesty or something for Benjamin Netanyahu. And there are secret talks between senior figures in the Israeli courts. One of them is the previous head of the Supreme Court in Israel, or the High Court. And they're trying to get it sorted. Now, from an Israeli perspective, as in those who are participating on the court's behalf, as in even if it's unofficially, they're trying to have certain guarantees that, okay, if we remove all of these things, there's definitely going to be something significant to a level where it would be possible. And then some people are saying, well, okay, we can do that here, but you can't have, you know, full impunity from the courts in the future, even if you are not a prime minister. And Kime, when do you anticipate approximate an actual ceasefire? I think there's a very high likelihood that something can be declared up to the end of this month. Again, that's my reading. I could be totally wrong. But it has to end at some point. There are certain indications that this is where we're heading to. The developments on the ground is the fact that Israel couldn't defeat the Palestinian resistance, that they reached their maximum capacity in trying to attack certain countries that they wanted to attack, and that the more time goes by, the more that this illusion of a success in reality, but real success in the head of Netanyahu probably, is going to fade away. And Netanyahu doesn't want these accomplishments or so-called accomplishments to fade away, and for everything to become viewed as a liability, as a pure liability. Like the people who are getting killed now, his genocide soldiers in Gaza, they're viewed as a big liability. Because the argument is, well, if there's a deal on the table and you haven't taken the deal and these people are being killed and they're wasting time, these people are dying for no reason. So that's why I think there could be something here. Saying that, you're dealing with a psychopathic lunatic. He's a psychopathic lunatic. And you have Trump in the United States. But again, there's a limit. There's a limit to what they can do, and there's a limit to how far they can go. Cookie, Mahmoud, the Palestinian resistance is blowing up tanks regularly. How many more tanks do the IOF have? Well, they run out of tanks. Well, I'll give you some statistics. Over half a year ago, actually, on the first year commemorating the beginning of Al-Aqsa flood, the Palestinian resistance said that they took down around 1,000 or targeted approximately 1,000 Israeli machinery, which includes tanks and bulldozers and troop carriers and other military vehicles like Hummers and what have you. A big chunk of this number, much of it was tanks, and many of them were totally roasted. Israel had a problem with spare parts. They reached a stage where they started to use old troop carriers like the M113 from the 1960s. That is very, and any attack on it would be way more lethal than an attack on a more modern one that the Palestinian resistance already targeted, by the way, because Israel was trying to portray some of them as if they cannot be penetrated and what have you. And then you had this video just over a week ago of a Palestinian resistance fighter literally handing them an explosive device there and eliminating everyone. So, well over 1,000 now. I was talking about a year ago. Add in at least 400 to 500. That's 1,400, 1,500. Israel doesn't specify the exact numbers. It'll have several thousand tanks. We can still see the tanks going in, so they're still operational. The United States is sending them spare parts to repair what has been damaged. And they also just recently sent them another shipment of D9 bulldozers, because many of them were destroyed by the Palestinian resistance. But all of these things and all of these losses must be taken into account and into consideration when factoring in the prospect and probability of a ceasefire. Because Israel doesn't have an infinite number of everything. Like, even if you want to talk about the war with Iran and why did it end so quickly when Israel hasn't achieved anything? The Israelis and the Americans, they haven't achieved anything, by the way, in Iran, apart from these attacks here and there. At least from the objectives. Netanyahu said destroy the nuclear project and their strategic missile capability, and he wanted to take down the establishment. None of that happened. But they used 2 years worth of THAAD production in 12 days. Imagine. So all of that shows you that they can't last for a very long time. And if they're unable to impose their will on Gaza, then what are they going to do with the other sides too? Stephen Kelly, are Egyptian groups smuggling weapons to Hamas? Well, you see, you wouldn't know who and how, and is it organized, is it not organized, does the government know, or are they turning a blind eye? You can't be conclusive about any of them. That's how they manage to do stuff, without, of course, things being known. But what's for sure is the Israeli side is saying that that's still happening. For example, I quoted the Israeli Major General Yitzhak Brik the other day, who said that Gaza is receiving large numbers of weapons from the Philadelphia corridor because Israel has no capacity, capability, or manpower to take down the tunnels. And all of the tunnels in Gaza are still functional. And they are still fighting. That's 2 years of constant fighting. There must be something here. How? Who? Very difficult to tell. That's very difficult to tell. And they would, of course, would want to keep it a secret as much as possible. And don't forget, by the way, sometimes it's not just from Egypt. It's from Israel. There have been several cases revealed in Israel about people, corrupt people, in the Israeli army selling weapons to Palestinian groups. That happened. Or even criminal gangs. As a matter of fact, many of the IDF soldiers or terrorists, they later turned into the crime world in Israel. And some of them used their access to the army to have very heavily equipped criminal gangs, by the way, in Israel. Siraj, do these clowns pictured here even look like humans? I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. Guy Roniza, Salam said that country is not demanding democracy in the UN instead of 5 permanent members looks like an apartheid to me. I totally agree with you. The United Nations is not based on democracy or a true representation of the global population. It's an extension of Western powers, primarily the United States now, because they were primarily in charge of the League of Nations that preceded the United Nations, and 5 permanent members in the Security Council. You know, that's not a real representation. They can dictate basically the fate of the whole world, and they don't really take any action as much as it's needed, by the way, or as much as, the situation might be desperate. And the past 2 years have proven clearly, the hypocrisy, the double standards. When Russia attacked Ukraine, within weeks, they immediately had a Security Council resolution. Everything was already done. In the Gaza genocide, although global powers asked for an immediate ceasefire, including permanent members of Security Council, China, Russia, and Brazil at the time, nothing whatsoever. And then veto after veto after veto. In essence, the United States dictating the world. But now we have the global power is shifting. It's undeniably shifting, but this process can take a lot of time. It's not like a very quick process. But what's happening now in Palestine is an example of the bigger picture. An example of how the power of the United States establishment is fading away, or how the empire is collapsing. And if we look at history, by the way, it's quicker than previous empires do. And they're trying to limit the damage as much as possible. And Michael, thank you very much. And everyone else who is participating and sending supers, much appreciated. Did I miss anyone? No. Hamad, are the Arabs themselves the main problem in the Middle East? Seems like all they do is betray each other. Well, to be more specific and not to generalize, if we talk about the Arab establishments, that would be a more apt way to put it this way. Because we can't say, because it's not a representation of the population. You can go into another argument, right? That, okay, well, you are ruled by certain people and you're not taking action and you have responsibility, a separate story. But let's talk about the Arab establishments or Arab countries and who they're led by. They are a result of the division of the previous colonial powers of the region. Primarily France and the United Kingdom, the British Empire at the time, with the famous Sykes-Picot Agreement, who showed the Arab leaders that, oh, we're coming to rescue you from this Ottoman oppression, capitalizing on some of the mistakes and wrong politics of the Ottoman Empire to try and push for the narrative of this Arab independence and Arab nationalism. There was nothing called the Arab states before. You used to go to study in Cairo, then you would go to work in Palestine, go to Beirut, and you visit Damascus, go down to the Hijaz. There was these borders. They're colonial maps made up with people put by the colonial powers in return for not doing anything against them, against their interests. So that's why when the division happened and there was a Balfour Declaration, who gave the Balfour Declaration? The British Empire. What other promises did they make to who? To the Arab kingdoms and the other Arab countries, right? So you have the same power that granted, or as if they have the right to, Palestine handed something they don't own to people who have nothing to do with the land. They are the same ones who put these people in power in other countries. So it's always important to remember that when we're looking at the action or lack thereof. So that's why you will see, some of the Arab countries and some of the Arab media as well downplaying or not taking the relevant action, or downplaying the resistance, or downplaying what Iran does, or, trying to push for another division propaganda campaign too. All of that is connected. But again, are they a representation of the people? Highly unlikely. Like the Western leaders are not a representation of the Western populations. And by the way, let's talk a little bit about responsibility, okay? Because, lots of people talk about, and absolutely, every country next to Palestine, the Palestinians themselves, and again, we have problems with the Palestinians, some of the Palestinian leadership, right? And some within. But I would argue that the bigger responsibility lies on the West. Why? Because it's your governments who started this in Palestine. So there's a difference between those who defend and have a duty to defend, and there's a difference between the people who had their own governments push this against the Palestinian people. So that's why even in Western populations where the establishment do not represent the people, there's a very big responsibility. because it's your country that started that. So that's why you'll see people who are vocal and are active are very fierce. Why are we doing this? And why were they hiding this from us? Or why were we made to feel like we can't talk about this? Right? It's very important, because did the Palestinians cause this problem to themselves? How exactly? By welcoming people fleeing the war in Europe? How? So yeah, and remember what I said about the thing about that division part, because it starts from there. All of it starts from there. And if we forget that this is what they did with the Arab rulers, then you're going to be lost in kind of thinking, well, why? Why are they not doing anything? Kima, you asked him about cross streaming on Twitter or Rumble. Yeah, I thought about that, to be fair, but I prefer to be concentrated in one area. For example, on X, I'll have the posts, or the posts that, let's say, are more acceptable on X, because with each platform you will have a certain limitation. But I prefer YouTube personally, and prefer to work with the scope of YouTube in terms of live streaming. However, in relation to, for example, certain things that this platform might not accept or view as, you can use other platforms or post on them. But most of my videos are primarily basically on YouTube. Yvonne, Mahmoud, what do you think about the US bully imposing sanctions on a wonderful human being, Francesca Albanese? Who did the United States not threaten to impose sanctions on? The ICC chief prosecutor. Now Francesca Albanese. Americans. Now Trump is saying if Zohran Mamdani wins the elections in New York, he's going to remove him from power. But that's supposed to be the most democratic country in the world. What happened? What happened to the Statue of Liberty? So it's not surprising. And it's another attempt to silence people, especially in, global organizations. You have the campaign to scare people online or on social media or in general. And then you have the officials. That's why many of them resign, by the way. Yet some of them still try and work within their capabilities, or try and have influence. And Hamad, thank you very much, brother, for that, and everyone else participating. Let's see if we have a couple of other inputs before we wrap up. And Lavatare, thank you very much as well. Michelle, more children killed in Gaza the first 3 weeks since October 2023 in all warfare worldwide in the last 3 years of 2020, 2021, 2022 combined, Roger Finkelstein. It's an infanticide in Gaza. It's not just a genocide. And they do that deliberately. I'm telling you, the past couple of days, they've had these massacres in places as if they're running out of anything to target, as if they're doing it for fun. People waiting in queues to get some aid, people sitting and having a drink. You know, there was this woman who was killed. I think I posted her image on X. She was killed with her children as they were queuing to get medicines. See that? Today I saw a disabled man who lost his wife and his children. Every single day. And I'm telling you, they do that deliberately because there's no one to target, you see. And against the Palestinian resistance fighters, they run away like rats. They don't do anything. Okay, we'll wrap it up here, guys. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in for another live stream and open QA as well. Thank you for everyone who sent supers. Glenn, Lavatare, Hamad, Talib, Dean, Michael, Matlas, Donna, T, The Virus, Tony, F, and F. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry if I missed anyone, by the way. And thank you, everyone who participated in the chat. Apologies if I missed some of your comments, but hopefully, you know, we're here regularly with live streams, and hopefully I'll try and make more live streams with Q&A as well, you know, if I have the time. I'll hopefully have some segments for you, for those of you who want to watch like shorter clips of the live stream and you don't watch the whole thing. In the meantime, guys, again, thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your evening, day, or night, depending on where you are. And I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Salam.